Look, that's an interesting one. Received by phone, the location Moncur Street. Message broken windows, and the person who reported it is a householder, and that just happened, what, this happened just a few seconds ago. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. I wonder if we could get in the right frame of mind for tonight's program by me asking you to take a long, lingering look at the person sitting next to you, please. Would you do that now? Look deep into that face. And I'd like you to think about the ways in which what you're seeing could show proof of pleasant character. A pleasant character. Okay. Let me ask this gentleman over here. Could you tell me what you see in this gentleman's face that tells you he's pleasant?
His eyes.
His eyes, yes.
Yeah.
Anything else? He's got a moustache like you.
Yes.
All right, okay. Did anybody find that exercise impossible? I mean, is anybody sitting next to a right nasty? Nobody could. All right, take a second look at that face, everybody, please. And this time, look for a character in it that would tell you that if that person were a criminal, what kind of crime they might commit. What kind of crime they might commit. Okay, now let me go back to where I was before. Okay, now, suppose you looked at that chap's face. What kind of criminal do you think, what kind of crime do you think he might commit?
Fraud.
Fraud. Does anybody in the audience think they're sitting next to a real criminal? Somebody who's actually really done something against the law? No? All right, let me ask this poor gentleman another question. If you discovered that this chap was a real criminal, would it alter your attitude towards him in any way at all?
I suppose it would depend on what he'd actually done.
But it would alter you in some way?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, well, let us find out if the assessments you've just made of each other are good or bad, real or not well thought out, because that's what tonight's program is about, that kind of judgment making. Beginning with this one. I'd like to introduce you to Mr. X. Let's just call him Mr. X. He has carried out a crime, a burglary, and I'd like you to hear from his own lips a statement.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I could see this particular house was no bother. I mean, some people, I mean, they're just stupid, aren't they? They're asking for it. I mean, there was all this stuff lying all over the place and an empty suitcase on the ground floor. I mean, ruddy fools. I just filled it up, didn't I? I mean, there's about 2,000 quid in notes, about 60 different bits of jewellery, half a dozen candlesticks, 2 cameras, a portable TV set, and a couple of very nice little antique ivories. Money for jam.
This gentleman has committed 2 previous offences of the same type. This time he got away with £55,000 worth of equipment. And if you think about what burglary means to the victim, especially when it's a woman, it can be a very traumatic experience having a house violated like that. Add that to the fact that over the last 25 years, that's what's happened to the crime rate, rising to what some people are calling frightening proportions, a point where perhaps the fabric of society isn't as strongly held together as it was before. Now, with all those things in mind, let me ask you to go to the little reaction meters each one of you has. That's the little knob that you turn right if you feel very strongly, or less right if you feel less strongly, and register on that how strongly you feel about the offence this Mr. X has committed. Now remember, we're not sentencing him, we're not asking whether he's guilty or not, we're saying how strongly do you feel about that crime. Do that now, please. Yes. Well, you obviously feel fairly strongly. Let me ask this lady over here. Madam, would you do me a favour, and the rest of you, listen carefully. I'm going to ask you to take, you see those crimes up there, those offences against the law? I'd like you to tell me what order to put them in, from very bad down to the least bad one. Have you got that?
Yes.
Now, if anybody disagrees with the order she's putting it in, just yell no. I'd like to hear that as soon as you disagree. Okay, what's at the top?
Murder.
Murder. Everybody seems to agree with that.
Rape.
Rape second. No, somebody's yelled no. All right, we'll go back to that. Yes?
Assault on a policeman.
Assault on a policeman. Anybody disagree with that? No. Somebody disagrees with that, yes?
Reckless driving.
Reckless driving next. All right. No, a lot of disagreement about that, yes?
Burglary.
Burglary next, all right?
Fraud.
Fraud, quite far down, all right?
Car theft.
Car theft. And you put last of all,
Cannabis.
do I hear any disagreement with that list? Yes, I do. We did hear disagreement. Okay, well, look, you, sir, you said no almost immediately on her list. Why, the gentleman in the black along here, why did you disagree so much?
Well, I thought burglary was more serious than rape.
Yes, well, you would, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I mean, no, seriously,
Yeah.
why do you think burglary is more serious?
Well, I've been burgled for a
Oh, I
start.
see.
And also, I think it affects more people.
It affects more people,
Yeah.
yes. Well, I could have gone right through the audience and asked all of you, and you probably would have disagreed with one point or other of what this lady did. Because, I mean, I don't know where you all come from, but you might well represent 50 different communities, 50 different personal attitudes as expressed in a community. I mean, if you live in a small village, vandalism matters a great deal to you, much more than if you live in the centre of a very large town. And those attitudes of the communities can affect, to a certain extent, the kind of activity carried out by the police in trying to deal with crime. Which brings me to this piece of hardware over here. It's a computer, as you can see, and it's linked to to a real community, the Glasgow and Strathclyde area, and later on in the evening we'll be going in, as it were, direct to see what's happening in Glasgow. But for the moment, let me ask Constable Smith to bring up one set of rather interesting figures, and perhaps Superintendent McNair, who's in charge of the complex up there, perhaps you could tell us what they mean, Superintendent.
This is a scale that we have running from 10 to 1 on various crimes. Now, it's a scale not of order of seriousness, as the audience here have put their crimes this evening, but a scale according to the deployment of manpower that we have to do to counter them.
Yes.
You'll see that we have murder at the top,
Yes.
as the audience have.
Everybody would agree.
Rape, however, as the lady has put it, second, we in fact have it halfway down, because it doesn't require the same involvement of police manpower to solve it.
I see. Now look, that's an experimental exercise as yet, thank you, Superintendent, up in Glasgow. But, I mean, sooner or later, every police force has to make that kind of decision. And if we went round all of you and asked you to compare your attitudes with those expressed in Glasgow, there'd be differences, just as there are differences between you, madam, and your choice, and Glasgow, and you, madam, and the rest of the people in this audience. What I'm trying to say is that local attitudes can affect the statistics on which you partly based your attitude to Mr. X in the first place. Superintendent McNair told me before the programme, perhaps you could tell everybody else again, how local police reaction can actually affect the figures.
Well, we had an area of the city which we felt was requiring a permanent police presence, which it hadn't had up until then. 1972, we built a police station in it, and we noticed thereafter an immediate increase, a very sharp increase in reported offences and disorder and the like. Now, this doesn't mean, of course, that the presence of the police generates more crime. It was simply that they now had a means of reporting them.
So it's not, the figures were wrong, in fact. There was no crime there before, and there was.
Well, you have to look closely at figures.
Yes. Thanks very much, Superintendent. Now, so what we're talking about is the fact that your attitudes, your community attitudes, affect the local police and their activity, and that in turn affects the figures. And I'd like to show you another way in which that can happen, because somewhere in your community, one day along comes a policeman, and he has to stop somebody who's getting up to some funny business. And he is, to a certain extent, reflecting your attitudes. Now, watch how that affects how the statistics end up getting onto the books. What I'd like you to do is to watch a sketch, a scene, and tell me that what the man has done. He's a suspicious character, and you are a policeman. You're in the position of the policeman. Watch out for the kind of criminal activity that you would identify afterwards. You're paying by check. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you which crime you saw. What crime did you see being committed? Anybody in this area here? Fraud. Gentleman on the left with the red tie in the middle.
Fraud.
You saw fraud because of the check? All right. Gentleman down here in blue, right in front of you.
Litter bug?
A litter bug, okay. Let me ask the audience over here what they saw. Did anybody see anything different from that? Gentleman here with his hand up in the middle.
Lighting a cigarette.
You saw him lighting a cigarette with the petrol there. Okay, well, we've got various people thinking various things about what happened. Let me go back through that incident, replaying it on our slow motion machine, and tell you what happened. If you were looking out for what he did, how many ways you could have got him if you wanted to. Okay, here he is, he comes in. First of all, he's not wearing a crash helmet, nobody noticed that. Is he entitled to that uniform? That's against the law. Is he entitled to the medals? That's against the law. He's smoking at the gas station. Well, that actually is a matter for the gas station owner, not him. It's against, the gas station owner can be had up for it. Okay, he goes on then forward, and you saw that what happened next was that he saw that there was a £1 note in the dustbin. Now that is called stealing by finding. Then later on he went across, he took out a checkbook. Okay, was it a stolen checkbook? That's against the law. And he paid for the petrol with that checkbook. Now, there are lots there. Obtaining petrol by deception, obtaining by forged instrument, forgery itself, uttering a forged check, and effectively stealing petrol. Right. He then moved away. He threw away the bit of paper. Now, littering on private property is not an offence, so that's not an offence. However, he then moved away and he threw away the checkbook. That's getting rid of the evidence. That's an offence. If you'd looked, and of course you couldn't, but a policeman would know for these things. If you had looked at the little bulb on the front of his headlamp and you couldn't read the wattage, then that would have been another crime. So you see, there are lots there. The interesting thing is that we asked several senior policemen around the country to tell us how many of those crimes he would have been charged with and therefore moved towards being on the statistic books. And they said, well, first of all, depends on what point you catch him, how much he confesses, how strong the evidence is. But of all those crimes I mentioned, they said anything varying from 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 10. So you see, the statistics that we've seen are not necessarily a true mirror of what's happening. What we are basically talking about is our personal attitudes and how they can affect the statistics, and how they can change the statistics. Well, before the program began, about a week ago, we sent out a survey and asked all of the people in this audience, chosen randomly, to fill in the questionnaire. It asked them to say to what extent they had been victims of crimes over the last 5 years. Now, not everybody filled it in. Most people did. Let me tell you some of the things that came out of that survey. 1 in 5 of you had a house broken into and something taken, and most of you told the police. 1 in 5 of you had a walk-in theft, not a break-in, a walk-in theft. Only half of you told the police about that. 1 in 3 of you had some other theft happen to you, and very few of those informed the police. But listen to this, 1 in 3 of the people in this audience have been attacked, and nobody told the police. 1 in 3 of you were threatened with violence, and very few of you told the police. And this one, over half of the people in this audience have witnessed an offence at some time in the last 5 years, and of those 25 people, 3 told the police. Those figures, the things that happened to you that you never told anybody about, are in the criminologist's language called dark figures. That is to say, crimes committed but never discovered because for some reason or other, like many of you, they were never reported. The criminologists we talked to came to a sort of general consensus of agreement about to what extent those dark figures might affect the statistics on which you judged Mr. X at the beginning of the show. If you apply the dark figures on the percentages that they've made an enlightened guess at to all over the country, you get significant changes to what's happening to the statistics. Look, here they are as they stand. Here's theft. That part there is the part that's cleared up by the police. This part here is the part where the crime is known to have happened but was not cleared up. And you can see that theft is about 2/3 cleared up. Quite a lot of vandalism is cleared up. Almost all murder is cleared up. Fraud, about half and half. Almost every sex offence is cleared up. Quite a lot of shoplifting is cleared up. About half car thefts. Almost everything in cannabis is cleared up. Not very much of burglary. Quite a lot of assault. All speeding, of course, is cleared up because you don't know it's happened unless you've been nicked. And then everything is cleared up. Drunk and disorderly, almost all. Now, let's go back in and put the factor in there that you told us about, the dark figures, and see how the entire bulk of the crime that's happening in the country changes drastically. Because what you're looking at is the tip of an iceberg. Look, theft. Look at vandalism. Very little effect on murder. Fraud grows a great deal. Sex offences are larger. Shoplifting goes up. Shoplifting goes up by quite a lot. Car theft significantly increased. Burglary, assault. Look at speeding. So you can see that in fact the crime statistics that you thought were straightforward and the stuff you read about in the newspapers is not very straightforward. Now, in the light of that fact, in the light of the fact that there may be an enormously greater amount of crime going on than you thought, an enormously greater number of criminals around than you thought, does that affect your attitude to Mr. X when you judge him about how much he should be to blame, the severity of your attitude towards him and his crime? Could we see if that changes your attitude, and if so, alter it now? Well, a significant change. Okay. Never mind the figures. We all know what is against the law, don't we? But do we agree? I mean, let me go over here and ask, does anybody in this group think that fox hunting should be against the law? Okay, there's a gentleman in a dark suit right at the back there, on the last row. So why do you think it should be against the law?
Well, I basically feel that it's brutal, basically. I was brought up in a country environment, and there was one literally killed under my nose, and since then I have a grievance against it. I feel very strongly.
Does everybody, could you put up a finger if you agree with him that it should be against the law? Well, some and some. Okay, In order to find out the extent to which you do have personal attitudes in this audience, we conducted another survey on you, part of the same one as before. This survey asked you to tell us anonymously, don't worry, anonymously, if any of you had ever committed an offence in the last 5 years. This is what the survey said. Remember, this is a random audience. We didn't know you before you came. We found out your addresses and sent the questionnaire. In the past 5 years, almost half the people in this audience did not pay their television license. Almost half did not pay bus fare. They got off without paying. 3/4 of you took stuff from the place you work in. Nearly 3/4 of you made phone calls on the company. 3/4 of you went speeding more than once. 5 people in this audience admitted driving without insurance and license. 5 people admitted not reporting a car accident, and 5 people admitted stealing money. 10 of you in this audience said you would feel no guilt at all about overclaiming on insurance, fiddling taxes, bribing a garage to get your MOT test passed, and taking, if you'd been given money by a cashier in a bank wrongly, of taking it and clearing off and not going back. Lots of people actually, although we didn't ask them to, wrote justifications. Now, in the light of that, I wonder if we could just ask some people over here. Nothing serious, just between you and me and 10 million people watching. Does anybody want to confess to a bit of speeding? A bit of speeding. The gentleman in the suit in the middle row. It's against the law, you know.
Yes, I got caught.
Oh, you got caught. But why did you do it in the first place?
I was in a hurry to get somewhere.
But you knew it was against the law?
Yes.
But not against the law for you?
Not at the time, no, I didn't think about it.
All right. Very brave man. I mean, I'm sure we all do it, don't we? I mean, it's against the law except when it's for me. That's the point. Now, in the light of this further evidence of the fact that we have an audience more than half full of people who have actually committed criminal offence, can you be so certain of the unbiased nature of the way you judge Mr. X in the first place? If it alters your judgment, knowing what we found out about each other, would you change your reaction on the meter again? Yes, I see. Well, obviously you do really seriously think that the law is against him and for you. All right, that's as may be. In the light of that, I wonder if we could listen to another statement by Mr. X.
You know, well, I mean, the real thing is how badly the other bloke suffered, isn't it? I mean, as soon as I saw this place, I knew this bloke was up to his ear holes in money. You should have seen the things I couldn't get away with. There's a ruddy great Rolls Royce in the garage. Probably got that on a tax fiddle. I mean, he wasn't going to miss the little bit what I nicked, was he? I mean, well, anyway, that bloke's always insured, isn't they? I mean, if you're asking me about crime and suffering, that bloke didn't suffer. It wasn't no crime. Anyway, that place was wide open.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. X obviously has a personal attitude, just as all of you do, about the law. You have personal attitudes, so does he. He obviously thinks that the man having a lot of money and the man being insured decreases the severity of what he did. To a certain extent, you know, what happens with pilfering in the country. Millions of pounds every year goes in pilfering. The companies, rather than do anything serious about it, put up the price a tiny amount. We pay a pilfering tax. We implicitly condone that crime and do nothing to try to stop it. We pay the extra. Now, Mr. X obviously thinks like that if you insure your house against crime, you are implicitly saying that it's built into the system. Now, does that change your attitude to him in any way at all? If it does, either move or don't move your reaction meters. See, it was all the way up here, and now it's moved down to this point. Did anybody notice the last thing he said in his last statement? Anybody? Yes, he said, besides, it was wide open. The place was wide open. Mr. X burgled a house. Maybe protective measures could have been taken to stop it. Can I ask if anybody over here, does anybody take protective measures to protect their house? Any of you? Put up a finger if you do.
Locking doors
There's
and windows.
the lady down here in front of me.
Locking doors and windows.
Locking doors and windows. The lady behind?
I would say the same thing, and since it's been burgled, locking them even more securely.
Locking them even more securely, all right. To put up a finger if you I don't know, how many of you actually do take some measure to protect your house? Like locking doors and windows. Okay, you can do all sorts of things. This is a replica of a bigger model. I mean, you could put a 17 or 18 foot fence around your house, wire it up so that any time anybody touched it, you could hear it. You could, if you wanted to go to that extent, you could buy geophone sensors and put them under the turf so that if anybody walked on your lawn, you would hear it. You could put up sensors outside all around your house like that one over there so that if anybody approached it from any side at all, you would hear it. And inside the house and all around it, great big fence, closed circuit television, You could have shatterproof windows. You could have grills that came down and slammed shut at the first hint of trouble. You could have burglar alarms, anti-vandal devices, and so on, if that's the kind of thing you want. Can I ask how many people in this audience would like to live in that kind of society? Put up a finger if you would. Nobody. Yeah, of course, it's sane. We all want to live in an open society, don't we? Where there aren't bolts and bars everywhere. On the other hand, living in an open society means providing houses which are open enough for Mr. X to get into. I mean, it's a sort of quid pro quo. To what extent, therefore, is your choice, deliberate choice, not to protect your houses, does that involve you to a certain extent in the blame that you thought Mr. X should carry alone? I mean, you chose the open society. I wonder if I could ask if that makes any difference, whether you would alter on your reaction meters, and we'll see what happens there. Do you accept any of the guilt? At all? Okay, no. Fine. All right. The main thing is, of course, we're very ambivalent in our attitude. The meter's been going up and down all evening. But the one thing that we're not ambivalent about, if the surveys are to be believed, is that we say it's the police's job to do it. That's what they're there for. Increasingly, people are doing that, because there are plenty of coppers around. If you look over here, you'll see the number of policemen that the average town of 71,000 gets. It's called a subdivision, and it's 120 policemen. Now, every time you have a policeman, you have to have 5, because the other 4 can be away doing things like being on holiday, being in court, sometimes being sick, and sometimes being on training, and several other things. So for every 1 policeman, you need 5. Bear that in mind. You need 20 senior officers, sergeants, and inspectors to run the place. You need 35 men doing CID or running the office. These are straightforward figures. Suppose you want to run 3 panda cars, 1 each shift in your town. That takes 15 men. You are left with 50 policemen, but you remember you have to count 4 out for lots of reasons. It's possible. So that leaves you 10 policemen. Divide that into 3 shifts, and you have about 3 policemen patrolling the streets of a town of 71,000 people. Now, that's an extreme case, but it can happen. You put this manpower problem together with recent trends on the statistics, just the statistics, official statistics, and you get an equation. 160% increase in crime over the last 15 years. 40% increase in police manpower, and yet a clear-up rate that has remained virtually the same at 44%. How do they do it? They turn, because we make them turn, to technology. Radio first, and now this. Now this is the thing I showed you before. It's called a command and control computer. This one is linked direct to Glasgow, to the headquarters, with 8 more consoles like this working now to handle the situation in Glasgow, each one with an operator. The computer itself contains a memory of everything that has ever happened in that area from the day it went in and started operating. You can see here that there is a whole area of buttons which allows the operator to be in instant contact with anybody he needs to talk to, and the flashing red light indicates a 999 call with which he has to handle it, with which he has to deal. I wonder if we could ask you, Superintendent McNair, to tell us a bit about the main things the computer does.
Well, the computer can do a whole multitude of tasks, but I think if we restrict ourselves to the one that concerns the public most, that is reporting incidents. The controller here will take us through a new incident. You'll see the location is Argyle Street at Buchanan Street. The message he's indicated is a test from the studio here.
That's because we're putting it in the computer.
Exactly, yes. And the reporter is H343. Now we have that's the controller here.
Yes.
Now we have 2 fields, an action for control, which is a force control, or an action for the division concerned. And the controller has a choice as to what he's going to do with this incident. Now, prior to dispatching a vehicle to it, he refers to this other screen here, which gives us a map.
This one in here?
Yes. On the map, you'll see it's in the centre of there's a flashing sign which indicates the precise position of the incident, which was Argyle Street at Buchanan Street.
Oh, I see.
And scattered around the map, there are call signs of vehicles which are available to deal with this incident.
Like the one immediately before, FM 442?
RM, that's
RM.
correct,
Ah.
yes.
Now that code tells you what they're doing.
Code 42 is a 2-man vehicle patrolling and ready for a call.
But the way that gets onto the map and into the computer's memory is that in every police car there's one of these. And you simply punch up the codes saying, who am I, where am I, what am I doing? You don't have to use the radio, nobody can listen in. And it goes straight into the computer, it can be called up at any time. There's one other thing, if I can just continue my interruption, that I find very interesting about this computer, and it goes back to the business of crime trends and local attitudes and local situations. If you look at the map we've got up there now, and you'll see that in the top centre, there's a place called Ruckhill, do you see it? And right in the centre, there's a centre figure there of 52. That's the number of crimes that were committed in Ruckhill 4 weeks ago. Now, let's see how it changes to 56 3 weeks ago, And here again, 2 weeks ago, it changes to 71, so there's a crime wave on the rise there. And then last week, it goes down to 57. Now, you call up, how did that happen? Why did the figures go up and then down?
Well, these are figures that are at the disposal of the officer in charge of that area. And he, watching the trends over the 3 weeks, seeing a rising trend there, at the third week has taken some action to counter this. And we see in the fourth week then there's a reduction and hopefully a continuing reduction.
Could we go direct now and just take a quick look at what's actually happening in the Glasgow headquarters right now?
Yes, if we take an incident as it is at present. Here we see the location of it is in Hunter Street. The message, 2 boys breaking into vehicles. The control...
reported by an anonymous
female.
Yes.
The force control has taken action by sending a car Alpha Mike 3 to attend to it. And the local division have also sent 2 officers to deal with it, E378 and 389.
That's their numbers, yes?
Yes.
And the result is they've no trace of the boys?
Exactly.
But it allows you to react extremely quickly, doesn't it?
Yes, we react very quickly.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Well, look, we could go on, but you get the point. Right now in Glasgow, somewhere in Glasgow, a real Mr. X is being arrested. And look at the meter. It's been going up and down throughout this program as your attitudes changed towards him. And yet, it's your attitudes that dictate everything we've been talking about tonight. Our attitudes. Our attitudes dictate that the computer is there at all, because it's part of the end product of our attitude towards crime, which ends up in asking for the policemen to be more efficient. We want to give them electronics and panda cars, and yet surveys tell us that we want the good old friendly Bobby back on the streets. Can you have both? We want computers fighting crime, and yet we don't want Big Brother. Can you have both? And look at the books all around the studio that you can see. Do you know what those books are? Those are the books referring to the laws of England and Wales alone, and the pile is growing every day. It's up to us. We could make heavy smoking a crime tomorrow if we wanted to, and the crime wave would go off the top of the charts. And no amount of computer in the world would help anybody handle that. You see, what we've been talking about tonight is our decisions. It's thinking about, okay, do we want the law? And if we want the law, do we want to obey it? The difference between public and private attitudes that you have so eloquently expressed tonight in those surveys. It's a complex problem because as a result of our attitudes and decisions, we get the police, we get the laws, and we get the crime waves as a result of our decision. What can you do about it? Well, I don't know. Maybe just for a start, all of us, me included, can go out and think twice the next time you do any of those things you did in your surveys. You know, not paying on a bus, or not paying for a TV license, or watching an offence and not reporting it to the police. Maybe that's enough. Just thinking twice about the result of a chain of events that you begin when you do that. The society around it you're creating when you start with those incidents. Maybe thinking twice is enough. You never know. The habit might spread. Good night.